Thanks very much. And please don't be insecure about eating during this presentation. I apologize if the content makes you feel so. Thanks very much for having me. This is like an ideal group for me to talk to because I, really want to get feedback, and I like interacting with just people who are doing empirical social science, better understanding, human behavior using the tools of social science. So this is just an ideal group to meet with. Thank you for having me. What I wanted to talk about today is this work that we're doing, looking at the impact of restaurant menu calorie labels on people's food choices. This work is joint with my colleague Alex Suskind, and we're very grateful to Cornell's Institute for Healthy Futures, the Institute for the Social Sciences, and the Building Faculty Connections Program for their financial support of this research. So the outline is what you're used to, right? Start out by just motivating this research question, describing what's going on in terms of public policy in this area, describing our hypothesis about what effects we think calorie labels on restaurant menus would have, and then describe how we test those hypotheses using a randomized controlled trial in an actual restaurant, describe the empirical model that we estimate, the preliminary empirical results, and then what are the policy implications of that. So just to take a step back, why is this something that we think is interesting? Well, in the United States, as well as many other economically developed countries, poor diets lead to very high rates of chronic disease. So, for example, in the United States, among adults, the prevalence of cardiovascular disease is 37%. 16% of American adults have hyperlipidemia or high cholesterol, and 34% have hypertension or high blood pressure, and 11% have diabetes, 95% of which is type 2, the type that's due to diet, lack of physical activity, as opposed to being juvenile onset. And of course, you're probably aware of the dramatic rise in the prevalence of obesity in the last several decades. So when I was a kid, the adult prevalence of obesity in the United States was 15.1%. Now it's 37.7%. So more than a doubling of adult obesity just since the late 1970s. So in trying to figure out where the problem lies in terms of poor diets, high prevalence of obesity, some people have focused on what's called food away from home. So that's a broad category that includes fast food, and it also includes people's eating in full-service restaurants. So full service means like a sit-down, there's a waiter who comes to your table to take an order. That's distinct from fast food. So the percentage of calories that we get as away-from-home food has risen over the past several decades. And that's potentially a concern because in general, people have less information about the characteristics of away-from-home food than they have about the food that they prepare themselves at home or a family member prepares at home. So you don't have perfect information about the food you prepare at home either. Like if you're making an omelet for Sunday brunch at home, you don't know exactly the fat content and cholesterol content, but at least you know how many eggs you put in there, you know whether you used cream or milk, you know how much cheese you put in there. Whereas when you're eating out and you order the omelet, you really have less information about all three of those factors, right? So the belief is that food away from home may be potentially problematic because people are acting with even worse information than usual about the characteristics of the food they're eating. And it is true that food away from home, people's consumption of meals away from home, is in general associated with people consuming more calories, more fat, more cholesterol, and so on. And the extent to which that may be due to people going out for a special occasion is sort of a subject to debate. So one potential solution to all these problems I'm describing is to basically just give consumers more information, provide them with information at the point of purchase, the point of consumption, so they can make more informed decisions. And so one particular piece of information in particular that's been focused on is the number of calories. Like you can imagine that there's lots of different characteristics of food that might matter, like the amount of saturated fat or total fat or cholesterol or sodium, but in general people have focused on calories as one piece of information that consumers might want. So the Institute of Medicine began calling for laws requiring the disclosure of calorie information on menus back in 2005. And subsequently, these types of laws, mandatory restaurant menu calorie labels, have been passed by cities, counties, and states. So New York City, Nashville, and Seattle passed them, for example, in the late 2000s. King County in Washington, which is home to Seattle, that passed it as well. Other counties in Maryland, Oregon, New York. And certain states also passed it, California, Massachusetts, Maine, and Oregon. And in addition to that, some restaurant chains have voluntarily begun disclosing calorie information. So for example, if you've been to a Subway lately, they disclose it nationwide. McDonald's, all of the restaurants in the Yum brand, which is KFC, Taco Bell, and Pizza Hut, and so on, Panera Bread. So next year, in May, takes effect across the United States, a nationwide law requiring restaurant menu calorie labels. And this was actually supported by the National Restaurant Association, which might surprise you, except that the NRA, the other NRA, would rather deal with a single set of laws regarding what they have to do in the restaurant than have to comply with different laws by cities, counties, and states. So the NRA actually advocated for a nationwide law to just resolve this matter and just come up with a single uniform standard. So this was actually included in Obamacare, the ACA, the Affordable Care Act of 2010, which includes lots of other things not particularly related to health insurance. And this is one of those things. So what's coming down the pike? So they finally issued the final regulations for this law, so we now know how this law actually has to be implemented. So the establishments that have to comply with next year's nationwide law are all restaurants, but also any place else that represents like a food retail environment. So for example, movie theaters, because they sell popcorn and soda, are subject to this law. Ice cream stores, bakeries, coffee shops, and so on. Interestingly, the list of exemptions includes schools and hospitals, which personally I would think of being two places that you particularly want to provide information to people, but those do not have to comply. Even if you are a restaurant, you're exempt from the law unless you're a chain of 20 or more locations, all operating under the same name, with substantially the same menu items at each location. So this is really something that's only going to be applying to large chains. Even if you are subject to this law because you're a large chain, not every food item has to comply. So anything that you have on the menu all the time does have to comply, but exemptions include daily specials. So if you're a restaurant that has a special appetizer, entree, or dessert every day, you don't have to calculate the calorie information every single day for these new items. That would be considered to be too burdensome. Likewise, if you have seasonal items, so like the Shamrock Shake at McDonald's, which is only on the menu around St. Patrick's Day, even though that's a regular item, every single March it's on the menu, because it's on the menu less than 2 months a year, it's exempt. So what exactly do they have to disclose? They have to disclose just the number of calories. And how do you find that out? The law allows for 3 different methods. So one is to use basically nutrient software, which is easily available. It's very easy to do. And it'll tell you the number of calories in a given prepared food item. Lab analysis. So one approach is to just burn the food and you measure how much energy is expended because calories are a measure of energy. And then other reasonable means, which I don't know if that ends up being a loophole that you can drive a truck through. But they also have to be really specific to make sure that people don't game this or circumvent it. So the law is really clear that you have to place this information right next to the menu item or next to the price. It can't be in a font smaller than that used for the name of the price. It can't be in a color different from the name of the price unless that color is actually more visible. So you can see they were thinking of how, restaurants might try to minimize the influence of this information. In addition to providing people with calorie information right on the menu, you also have to make other information available upon request. So like detailed nutrient information, for example. And interestingly, at the bottom of each menu, you have to have 2 statements. So one is that the additional nutrition information is available, and the second is the context. So the statement that 2,000 calories a day is used for general nutrition advice, but calorie needs vary. And so the reason for this is you just want to put some context on this. So if you tell someone that a burger is 750 calories, in the absence of any other information, it might be unclear, like, well, is that high, is that low? And so they're telling people 2,000 calories a day is sort of general guidance. And so this is a bit of a tangent, but that's a very loose guideline, and the actual number of estimated calories that a person needs each day depends heavily on things like age, your gender, how physically active you are, and your height and weight. So this table that was designed by the U.S. Department of Agriculture is set for a given weight and height of men and women. So those variables are abstracted from this. But you can see that although there are certain people who are recommended to consume 2,000 calories a day, for other people it's a lot higher or a lot lower. So for example, the left-hand columns are men. So a physically active young man is estimated to need 3,200 calories a day. Right? So half again as many as they're stating at the bottom of the menu. On the other hand, if you're a sedentary, older female, then you only need 1,600 calories a day, and the 2,000 guideline is actually overstating things by 40%. So, already you can see that this is kind of a complex situation, and it begins to, I think it illustrates the complications of even providing people with information, like how useful is it, how easily interpretable is it, and so on. So other people have studied the effects of these earlier city-level laws that required restaurant menu calorie labels. So Brian Elbel, for example, did street intercept surveys in New York City before and after New York City passed their law. And he did it both in New York City, which is the treatment city, and in Newark, which is the control, and focused just on lower income neighborhoods and only focused on fast food outlets. And what he finds is really no detectable effect. So a difference in difference model that compares New York City before after the law to Newark before and after the law found really no difference in the number of calories that people were ordering at fast food restaurants. On the other hand, Bollinger, they also studied the New York City menu label law, but they didn't have to do street intercepts. They got a hold of the Starbucks database. And so they got it for New York City as well as the control cities of Boston and Philadelphia. So they had literally millions of observations of transactions. And so they also estimated difference in difference model. And what they find is that the New York City menu label law decreased the number of calories that people ordered at Starbucks by 14.4 calories per visit, or 5.8%. And interestingly, there wasn't any change in calories from drinks, but there was a decrease in the sides. So people like ordering muffins or croissants or things like that. And then Eric Finkelstein got a hold of some limited data about the King County, Washington law. That's the Seattle law. So he got data from one Mexican fast food chain that operated both in the city where the law took place and then in the suburbs where it wasn't binding. And in the difference in difference model finds, again, no detectable impact of the menu label law. So these local menu label laws weren't necessarily the same as this federal law. And also, none of them give us information about what happens in a full-service sit-down restaurant. They concern only coffee shops, Starbucks, or fast food restaurants. There's very limited information about the impacts of menu label laws in a full-service restaurant. There was a recent systematic review that looked at all of the studies that have been done of restaurant menu calorie labels. They found only one randomized controlled trial conducted in a restaurant, and that had a sample size of only 138. So really limited statistical power.
The difference in difference studies that you were referring previously, did they control for any characteristics of the people, like education, or is it just consumption behavior?
So the Elbel study, they did conduct a survey where they collect information, but it was in lower income areas and patrons of fast food, so there's not as much variation as you might think. The Starbucks, they just the transaction data, so really not much information there. And then, the other studies as well that weren't RCTs, that were just sort of opportunistically collected data, also had really limited sample sizes, very limited power, and also not the best research designs, so either lacked a control group or lacked data from before the policy took place. So the contributions that we're trying to make is to, first of all, conduct a randomized experiment. Like I said, there's only one other one that was conducted to study this question, and that had a very small sample size. We're focusing on a full-service restaurant instead of fast food and coffee shop. That's not necessarily more important, but it's just some kind of a missing piece of the puzzle. We're looking at the effect of the labels that are going to be mandated next year. So the labels that we implement are compliant with the final regulations for next year's nationwide law. We have a larger sample size than previous studies, not the Starbucks one, but we have 2,513 customers. And we have rich data, so we have individual level orders. Because we're cooperating with the restaurant, we have the actual notations taken by the servers, so we know when people split orders, for example, and we can allocate those calories. We have detailed information about the courses people order, the number of calories they ordered, the number of nutrients. And then because we survey people afterwards, we also have detailed information about their characteristics, and we have the information that allows us to even control for things like server fixed effects, like which waiter or waitress did you have? Which table did you sit at in the restaurant? So what are our hypotheses? So assuming that people do have imperfect information at the time they're trying to place their order in a restaurant, we assume that providing people with the calorie information may have the following effects. That people may order fewer courses. So for example, if you know you're going out to dinner, maybe when you see this information, you just stick to ordering an entree, you don't order an appetizer as well, or you don't order dessert as well. We hypothesize that conditional on ordering a course, that you'll order fewer calories, right? There'll be a tendency to order the lower calorie options, and thus there'll be fewer calories overall ordered. And then also, if you remember, daily specials are exempt from the calorie label law. And so we're wondering, might there be a tendency of people to substitute away from the listed items that have calorie information towards the specials that don't? In other words, do you prefer the devil you don't know to the devil you do?
Ignorance is bliss.
Pardon? Yeah, right, exactly.
Yeah.
And then also, in terms of like heterogeneity of effects, we expect to find bigger effects among people who tell us afterwards that they actually saw that calorie information, and to people who report basically being more health aware. So people who report, I dieted in the past year, or general and more used to using nutrition information. So just to give you some information about the methods, we're conducting this randomized experiment in a full-service sit-down restaurant. So this restaurant's located on the Cornell campus, and Cornell has a school of hotel administration. So this is a restaurant. It's a real restaurant. It's open to the public, but it's run by the school to train students in restaurant management and operations. So it only serves dinner, and even though it's open to the public, the fact that it's on a campus means the clientele is 62% college students. So keep that in mind when thinking about generalizing from this. The way that it works is when you come to the maitre d' with your party, the maitre d' uses what's called Randomizer. It's a smartphone app. So the maitre d' at the desk sort of has their smartphone out. When you approach the desk with a reservation or not, they press the button on the Randomizer app, and it says either treatment or control. There's two sets of menus. If it's the control, then they get the regular menu that the server brings to you, and that regular menu lacks any information about calorie information. If it comes up treatment, then you get the other set of menus, and on the treatment menu is listed the calorie information and those two required statements. And then the maitre d' records what condition you're in. So, for example, at the beginning of the night, it's 5:30. The first party to be seated was seated at table 52. There's two people in the party. They were randomized to the treatment group. The next party is seated at table 41. They were also a party of two, and they're in the control group. So how do we know what the calorie information is about, what the calorie counts are for these different items on the restaurant menu? And I should clarify, the restaurant developed their menu the way they always do, with no input from us. So it's not like we created a set of entrees that we want people to compare. The restaurant's just doing its business, and all we're doing is layering this sort of experiment on top of it. So the way that we found out, well, how many calories are in each of the things that this restaurant is selling is using this software called Menu Calc. So this is one of the ways that the final regulations allow you to calculate calories for these required labels. And this software was developed for food professionals and restaurants in partnership with the National Restaurant Association. So the way it works is with the software, you just type in all the ingredients that you're using to create the recipe and information about how the recipe is prepared, and then you tell it how many servings are produced by that recipe, and then it outputs for you not just calorie content, but also like a nutrition facts panel that includes all the information about nutrients, cholesterol, fiber, and so on. So let me just show you what the menus look like. So I'm sort of smashing up the parts of the control menu with parts of the treatment menu here. So this is the appetizer section of the control menu, and it just lists what the items are, a little bit of description, and then the price. And so this would not be on the same page with this. This is from the control menu. This is from the treatment menu. And I've just sort of used these red boxes here to draw your attention to the fact that the treatment menu has the calories listed after each menu item in a way that's compliant with the final regulations of the ACA law. Just to clarify, too, those red boxes are there. I put on the PowerPoint for you to see. They're not on the menu, right? And one reason I just wanted to put this up is to show you that even if you're a well-educated person who goes to restaurants a lot, you might not have guessed these numbers if they weren't provided to you, right? So clearly, fries, okay, that's probably a high-calorie item. It's fried, but the calamari is fried too, but the calamari has 630 calories instead of 910 for the fries. Maybe you're deciding between the wontons and the wings. Well, the wings, that's mostly just a natural animal product with some glaze on it, but the wontons are actually, partly pasta product, and it's got dipping sauce too, but the wontons are less than a quarter of the number of calories of the wings. So I guess what I'm trying to say is I think there's new information here, right? This might not be information that people already had. And these are the two statements that have to be put at the bottom of every page of the treatment menu. The reminder about the 2,000 calories and additional nutritional information being available.
So the maitre d' is the person who hands out the menus?
To the server, and the server brings them to the...
So the server also would know...
Correct.
Which of the menus you're getting.
And the server comes back and checks that sheet because the dessert menu is separate. And so they have to refer back, make sure they bring the correct dessert menu to the table. So the server does know. So it's not a double blind. Yeah. So this is, I'm going to skip showing you the control menu from now on. You can just imagine it as lacking the calorie information. So this is the information for the entrees. And again, there's like really big variation. So the steak, for example, has 1,840 calories. And remember, like if you're an older female who's sedentary, you only need 1,600 calories a day, right? So the variation's really big. I mean, maybe you're deciding between the duck and the steak. Those both sound comparable, right? But the duck is only 690 calories, you know, a little over a third of what the steak has. Yeah. And then seafood is, you know, it's pretty modest actually, 580. So again, I think it's like eye-opening that there's a big variation in calories out there, even at the same restaurant, in the same course. And this may be new information to people. The desserts. So again, like this is one I actually had there, and I would have guessed this would be number one in terms of calories because it's donuts with sugar and chocolate dipping sauce. But that's only 660 calories, whereas the Napoleon is 1,150. So again, like there's a significant portion of the population for whom this one dessert is more than half of their daily calorie needs for the entire day. So a lot of variation here. And anecdotally, we did hear, and the servers heard, complaints.
Hello?
Yes?
Sorry. How accurate, like, are these numbers? Or, like, how should we be thinking about, like, I don't know very much about how calories are assessed, like, in particular through a database like that. Are they, I mean, are these, do we think they're, like, 10% of the truth? Do we think they're closer than that?
Yeah, I mean, that's a great question. So I don't. This might be something I can find out, but I don't know like what the error is in the menu calc estimates.
I want to attest to the same thing because it surprised me that the tomato soup.
Cheddar toast.
I'm one of those older women. I follow this like a hawk. And it surprised me 120 calories.
So it's a cream. Yeah, the tomato soup has cream in it.
And then cheddar toast.
And all the cream.
So oh yeah.
Does this treat each item as a single serving? So like,
Yeah.
Maybe somebody else's plate.
Now, if people said we're going to split the blank, the server records that, and we allocate in our data the calories separately. So remember, the law requires now that you have additional information available for compound requests. So we had a binder that was available to anyone who asked. As far as we know, no one ever asked for the additional information. So here, for example, is the steak.
64 grams.
And so I think, you know, seeing this additional information is a reminder that maybe it's not just calories that matter. Like there might be other things that would factor into your decision making. So for example, that steak, it's not just that the calories are high, but it's 2.25 days worth of total fat, 2 days worth of salt or sodium. The bombolini, those little donuts I liked, those have 2.5 days worth of cholesterol. So some really eye-opening information. But you know, food isn't just bad. Right? Food also has good things that we value. So, for example, the steak has 3 days worth of your vitamin A, a whole day's worth of vitamin C. You know, even those bombolini have a quarter of the vitamin A you need, and you both have fiber, of course. So we don't want to just focus on the negative things. People might be making decisions based on nutrients, for example.
So what are portion sizes like? Because I can imagine if it's a huge steak,
Yeah.
you're not measuring if people leave things over, right? The waiters might say they only ate half of it.
That's right. So we don't record information. So studies that have been done, a couple different studies that have been done, have come up with a similar estimate of about 89% of what people order they eat. And I'd say the portions here are average. They're not absurd where it's obvious people are taking home, and it's definitely not tapas or something where it's a modest little sample. So after the people's meal is over, we have research assistants there who then approach the table and ask each individual to complete a survey. And each survey is marked with the seat that people are sitting in, because then we can match it to the tickets. The ticket is what the server uses to record what each person in each seat ordered. And then we staple the ticket to the set of surveys, and so later everything is merged and entered by research assistants. We also merge with that data on the calories and nutrients, price of the items, the food cost, the cost of the ingredients, and so on. And the experiment was approved by the Cornell IRB.
How long did the experiment run for? I asked that because how many are you having repeat customers who
Exactly.
contaminate the...
We drop them. So we do ask everybody, have you been at the restaurant since we started this experiment? And then also in the survey we ask them, have you eaten at this restaurant since this date? And if you say yes to either, you're dropped.
And that's not a, I mean, how does that quote unquote bias your sample? Meaning, is this like a place that everybody comes all the time, therefore you're getting a really weird sample by?
Yeah, so I'll show you the exact numbers in just a bit. So it is a large number of repeats that we end up dropping, and
But
because
you
they're
have
not
the first
surveyed.
time anyway, so
Yeah, we have,
everybody.
yeah. So I'll explain the empirical model. So we're regressing outcomes Y, and outcome Y, we have several different ones that we are interested in. So of course, calories ordered, both by course and overall. Whether a person even ordered an appetizer or a dessert or a drink. So we look at the extensive margin, did you order the course, and the intensive margin, conditional on ordering the course, how many calories did you order? Whether you ordered a special, because there, right, the number of calories isn't listed. How is the number of nutrients or the type of nutrients you ordered affected by the calorie information? So we look at things like cholesterol, fat, vitamin C, vitamin A. The impact on restaurant outcomes. So we know the impact on revenue. We're able to estimate the impact on revenue minus food ingredient costs. So it's kind of like a rough measure of profit. And then also whether people just reported even seeing the calorie information afterwards, and whether they support a restaurant menu calorie label law. And so each of those Y's is regressed on the following regressors. So just an indicator variable for being randomized to the treatment group. So the neat thing about experiments is the econometrics afterwards are very simple. Right? You're just regressing it on the treatment indicator. And then we control for other characteristics X. So in model 1, which is the most parsimonious, the only regressor is whether you were randomized to the treatment group. In model 2, we also add information about the restaurant experience. So what day of the week were you there? Right? Because maybe Friday, Saturday, people order more than on Tuesday. We control for the table you sat in. Who knows, maybe sitting near the window leads people to behave differently. We control for the identity of the server you had, because maybe some servers look healthier than others, and that leads people to change what they'd order. And then in model 3, we add information from the survey, so age, race, gender, education, and so on.
Can I ask a question about the servers? Because oftentimes clients ask the server for recommendation.
Mhm.
And if the servers don't give the same information, that could be a source of indoctrination.
Yeah, so we're controlling. That's exactly why we wanted to control for the server's identity. And because it's randomized each time, sometimes the server's in the control, sometimes they're dealing with the treatment group. But informally, the servers reported back that people noticed and kind of even complained about the calorie information. So people would say, "We're trying to have a fun night out. Why are you showing us this?" So this gets to Dalton's point. Just wanted to explain the sample size and what exclusion criteria go into this. So I'll talk about the data we have two different ways. What are the data that we have from the tickets, the receipts, and what are the data we have from surveys? And so those don't line up perfectly because some people, by the time the RAs come to the table, the occasional person has left already, right? So we just miss a handful of people. So the biggest reason we drop people is because of the 4,100 people, roughly, 1,463 are on their second visit since we started the experiment. And what we're worried about is if you were in the treatment group the first time and you remember the calories, and the second time you're in the control group, we've contaminated the control group. So we just drop them, because we don't know over time. We don't keep track of people, what group they were in the first time.
It'd be really interesting to know, though, you get the IV in the first, you get the treatment in the first visit. You don't do anything to them in the second visit.
True.
And you can see whether there's a lingering effect.
That's right.
With the calories.
Yeah, but then for confidentiality reasons, we don't want to have a list of people at the restaurant that we know were in the survey before.
So then the repeat is identified by asking them?
Yes.
Okay.
So we asked them twice. The RAs say, have any of you been here? Have any of you done this before? Done the survey after dinner? We've been doing it since October. And then on the survey it says, have you dined at this restaurant since this date? And that's the day we started. So either one, you're out.
Did you drop the whole party or just the individual that's
So just the individual. Right, so there is some risk potentially that they talk to the others.
Do you know was there a treatment effect on being a repeat customer? Among the ones who dropped, were there more cheese who came back? Or more
So that's the premise. We don't have we haven't tracked people longitudinally, so we don't know. Oh, but you're right. I see your point, though. Like, maybe I like the fact this restaurant tells me calorie information, so I'm more likely to return. Yeah. Yeah, that would be a great thing to look at.
Wait, so you can't drop them then?
We do, because we just never collect the survey and we record that this person's a repeat customer, so we ignore what they ordered. We don't use that information about what they ordered.
But that information you have, so you could.
Yep, without knowing what treatment they got the first visit.
No, but.
And we don't know.
But I think if so I do school stuff, and if a program, a treatment affects mobility, I can't just look at the people who stay. And you're looking at just the people who were there the first time, even though you've randomized, a big group. You can't throw out people unless you can prove that the treatment had no effect on.
Well, we're looking at everybody's first visit. That's the way to think about, the way to interpret what we're measuring. So what we can't say is, after you've been exposed to information for months, repeatedly, do you have a bigger or smaller effect?
Right.
It's like an instantaneous effect.
Yeah.
Yes. So there's a small group, like 2%, where the maitre d' didn't write down their treatment and control group, so we dropped 95 people for that reason. 19 people were at the table at the end of the meal but never ordered anything, like probably showed up late to meet their friends, so we dropped 19 people. We're driven crazy by the 40 people who ordered one unknown item called tag. So if anybody knows what tag could be in a restaurant context that's a food order, we'd love to know it to resolve the 40
Did you ask the
cases.
servers? Is it a
Yeah,
shorthand?
there were other things we figured out, but we can't figure out tag. So the sample size for what people ordered, that comes out to 2,513. If we're talking about the outcomes from the survey, we also have to drop the 232 people who refused the survey, like just said, I don't want to take it, and then the 433 people who said, yeah, okay, I'll do the survey, and then just didn't fill it out. Just left it there. And so again, like, we're concerned about who didn't fill it out, but because they didn't fill it out, we don't know.
Is that the alcohol being served?
Oh yeah, I'll show you results for the alcohol. So just first to talk about the balance. Like, we're randomizing people, but that doesn't mean that everything is perfectly split between the treatment control group. And so the one characteristic actually that's significantly different is that 36.4% of the control group is male and 43.1% of the treatment group. So a 6.8 percentage point difference, which is statistically significant. So that's just the luck of the draw. So we're able to control for that. But in terms of age, the ages are virtually identical between the treatment and control group. Percentage white is virtually identical. Percentage Asian, percentage that are other races, all extremely similar. Hispanic ethnicity, weights are very similar, 148 to 149, the means. Heights and inches are very similar, and the percent that's currently in college. So the male, the sex is the one thing that differs between the two groups, but not these other characteristics. So just in terms of like what do we see? What are the unconditional patterns in the number of calories that people order by course and then overall? So it's broken out by appetizer, drink, entree, dessert, and total, and that y-axis is the number of calories ordered. So the one statistically significant difference that we see unconditionally is in the appetizer. So the people in the treatment group, which is the red, compared to the control group, which is blue, the treatment group ordered 40 calories fewer on average in appetizers. But like very little difference in drink, that's actually slightly higher for drink. Very, very little difference in entrees, very little difference in desserts, which is surprising to me because I personally thought there'd be like this mental accounting of the way to save on calories is to either skip dessert or order a healthier dessert, but there's no evidence of that really. And then overall, there's a difference of about 20 calories that's not statistically significant. So that's all unconditional, and I'll show you regressions.
Appetizers and desserts, if they didn't order one, it's 0?
Correct. And then so separately we'll look at the probability of ordering any one, the extensive margin, and then if you ordered what kind, because at the intensive margin. So here's the regression results. Remember, Model 1 just has the treatment indicator as a regressor. Model 2 adds the restaurant experience information, and then Model 3 adds the survey results. So in terms of the appetizer calories, you can see in Model 2 and Model 3 that it's statistically significant that patrons in the treatment group are ordering 43 to 44 fewer calories in terms of appetizers, and that's combining the extensive and the intensive margin. But looking at entrees, there's no statistically significant difference. Looking at dessert calories, and the point estimate is very small and certainly not significant. Drinks is positive but not significant. And then total calories in the third model, That's saying that the treatment group, on average, ordered 63.2 fewer calories overall once you control for the individual characteristics. So that's just calories. We're also interested in the extensive margin. Do you order an appetizer at all? Do you order an entree? Do you order a dessert? So here we're conditioning on you ordering an entree. We're saying, okay, given that you ordered an entree, do you also order an appetizer? And we see that people in the treatment group are about 5 percentage points less likely to order an appetizer, conditional on getting an entree. They're also slightly less likely to order an entree at all, 3.3 percentage points less likely. So my prior belief is completely wrong. People are not less likely to order dessert. And then this gets at Marta's question, is people are more likely to order a drink. And that's consistent across all three models. So somewhere between 6 and 7 percentage points, and only the mean is less than 40%. So we're talking about 13% more likely to order a drink. So that was the extensive margin. Now looking at the intensive margin, conditional on ordering that course, how many calories do you order? And so for appetizers, it looks like the action's really about not ordering an appetizer at all, as opposed to ordering a lower cal appetizer. I mean, the point estimates suggest a 25 calorie difference, but it's not significant. Among entrees, really small differences. Desserts, we do see at the intensive margin that people are ordering lower calorie desserts. And then drinks, lower calorie drinks. So you might be wondering, well, I don't know. So to me, the higher probability of ordering a drink, but ordering lower calorie drinks is this interesting combination. So to dig a little bit more deeply into that, we look at what type of drink people are more likely to order, and the answer is alcoholic. So consistently, it's about 5 to 6 percentage points more likely to order a drink on a base of just 29%. So more than 10% increase in the probability of ordering alcohol. Well, what kind of alcohol? And then at the intensive margin, you can see that the type of alcoholic drink is slightly lower. So let's dig a little deeper into this alcoholic drink category. Really, the hidden calories are in cocktails, because cocktails often have like orange juice or something else. And it looks like where the action's happening is in beer. So people are 2.6 to 2.9 percentage points more likely to order a beer. The wine point estimates are actually quite similar, but they're just not statistically significant, and then they're not more likely to order a cocktail. So I'll get to this at the end, but like one thing that this reminds me of is the study by Shiv and Fedorkin, where they asked people to either memorize a 2-digit number or a 7-digit number and keep it memorized until later when they'd have to report it back, and then they offer them a snack. And the people having to remember the 7-digit number were more likely to choose the cake instead of the fruit salad. So in other words, you may have sort of limited mental bandwidth. And if you're spending it thinking through calculations, like what calorie comparisons should I be making, you may succumb to temptation on another dimension. Just like choosing the chocolate cake.
You deserve it for remembering the long.
Do you have the ability to distinguish the college-age students from those older?
Yep. So we should look at the drink analysis separately by
Yeah, I
age.
just wonder if some of these behaviors would vary a lot.
Yeah, I mean, I think the type of alcohol people consume changes over the life course, right?
Substituting alcohol may be very different, or the going for dessert may be very different.
Yep, that's a great point.
The cognitive load would also explain your appetizers thing, because you order
Exactly.
appetizers and entree at the same time, then they come back for dessert, I assume, right?
Exactly.
And if you made
Exactly.
the right choice in the beginning, you're exhausted, you're just like hungry.
Yeah, I agree completely. So you're exactly right. So where we're finding an effect is the first two decisions you make most of the time, right? Do I want an appetizer and what kind? Do I want a drink and what kind? And you're absolutely right. So the entree, nothing, and the dessert, where I thought we'd get some action, there's nothing at all happening. It could be, like you said, I've spent my willpower, or I've spent all the calculations I'm going to do, I'm done with. Exactly. So there was also that issue of, do these regulations inadvertently encourage people to order specials because they don't have to tell you the calorie information about the specials? And we find no evidence of that. So here, conditional on ordering an appetizer, are you more likely to order a special one? The point estimates are really modest and not statistically significant. Same thing for the entrees, and same thing for the dessert. So it doesn't look like there's that push of people towards specials. So I think another neat thing that we're able to do is, instead of just seeing, well, how does calorie information affect the number of calories you order, how does calorie information sort of unintentionally possibly affect the other nutrients that you order, right? Because you don't necessarily have information about them, but there's consequences for those. So we look at things like fat, total fat in grams, fat calories, fat in grams, saturated fat is worse for your heart health, cholesterol, and sodium. And as you can see, like there's really nothing statistically significant in terms of those nutrients. Where we do see some changes, total carbs goes down. So people, when they're ordering lower calorie items, happen to be ordering lower carbohydrate items. But again, food isn't just bad for you. Food has good things for you, like fiber. Fiber is good for your both heart health and for your digestive health. And the amount of fiber that people order goes down. It goes down by about 3/4 of 1 gram, which doesn't sound like much, but on average people are only ordering about 11.7 grams of fiber. We don't see anything for sugar, protein, vitamin A, vitamin C, calcium, iron, or interestingly not much for ethanol. So we're able to calculate the grams of ethanol contained in every alcoholic drink that's served here across different, because beers differ. The beers differ in their alcohol content, especially craft beers tend to have higher alcohol. Wines can differ. The cocktails certainly do. So although we see people being more likely to order beer, more likely to order an alcoholic drink, it's not showing up in terms of like a significantly higher consumption of ethanol. So we're also interested in the impact this might have on the restaurant business, right? You can imagine restaurants being worried that this would lower their profits. So we look at what it does to their revenue. So this is just multiplying, using the price information about each order. And when we control for the survey characteristics, the treatment effect is to lower the dollar value of what people order by 76 cents on a base of basically $25. So not statistically significant, not gigantic. The rough measure of profit that we have is to subtract off food costs from the revenue, and what's left is sort of a rough measure of profit that doesn't take into account your labor costs. But again, no statistically significant change. Interestingly, there does seem to be savings in terms of labor time. So when people are reacting to the calorie label information, they happen to end up choosing things that take less time to prepare. So you could make a case to restaurants that you can have fewer workers, or at least the things that people are making will make fewer demands on their time. So another just like kind of basic, I think, interesting question is, to what extent do people even see this information, right? And so we asked people in the survey, did you see any calorie information during your restaurant visit today? And so there is a small percentage of people in the control group who claim they did. They saw something that wasn't there. And not everybody in the treatment group says that they saw it. But being in the treatment group raises the probability of seeing it by about 66 percentage points.
What would you prime that? So that you ask them, did you see this, rather than say, did you see anything different about the menu?
I think because we just don't want open-ended. We don't want open-ended answers. We really want to know, and this is at the end of the survey. So we really want to know, did you see that one thing we care about? And we couldn't just hope that it would come up naturally if we asked an open-ended question. And so just to clarify, that's all after they've placed their order and paid and they're done. We'd never want to ask this kind of priming question, like you're saying, before they actually experience the experiment, because it could change the way they behave. We also asked people, are you in favor of calorie information being required on restaurant menus? And interestingly, the people randomized to the treatment group, even though they may have complained to the servers, they actually are more in support of having this required disclosure of information. So it seems like customers support it. Or support it more after they're exposed to it. So we're also thinking of some other extensions we could do. So one is, currently what we're estimating is the intention to treat. What's the effect of just the menu having the information? So we'll also estimate what's the effect of treatment on the treated. So there we take into account whether people say that they saw the information. And we only consider those people to be treated. And then we also estimate for heterogeneous effects. In other words, are there mediating variables? Are there certain groups that respond significantly more than others to this calorie information? So for example, we ask people, do you typically read calorie information? Do you typically act on calorie information? Have you dieted in the past year? And also you might think demographics. Maybe women respond more than men. So we also look for heterogeneous effects.
Yeah, I'm also curious to know when the experiment was taking place, because I can imagine after the holidays, people would be more likely to take in less calories than others. So maybe.
Yeah, so definitely like from grocery sales that we've looked at in a whole other project, there really are these strong seasonal patterns. So these data were collected between October and December, and then again from February to April. So not right on either side of Christmas, for example. Getting into their swimsuit.
Could you remind us what fraction of your customers are students, and are they graduate students?
62% were students, and I don't remember. We have this information about which level they're in school, but
Because if the undergrads are usually try to replan, the only reason they're going out is it's a special occasion.
Yep.
They want to celebrate, so they want.
well, at Cornell though, a lot of kids live off campus in college towns. So, and we don't know whether they're in the dorms on mealtime, but the upperclassmen tend to be off campus or in fraternity sororities. So less of an effect from that. Okay, so this is now estimating the effect of treatment on the treated. So now your treatment indicator only equals 1 if you were both in the treatment group and you say afterwards that you did see the calorie information. And so the pattern of results is really identical. The only difference is that the number of calories of the effect is slightly higher. So 46.6 fewer calories on the appetizers, 79.6 fewer calories overall. Really no other change in the pattern of results. So then we wanted to investigate this possibility of heterogeneous effects. Maybe women respond more than men, or people who diet respond more than other people. So we added to the model this new term, which is an interaction between the treatment indicator and then some characteristic z. And so what I'm going to show you are the deltas. In other words, is there a significant difference for people with one value of z as opposed to another? And z is always going to be binary. So I'm just going to focus on calories as opposed to like other nutrients. And so this is what the z variable is. So for example, do you typically read calorie information? So this is set equal to 1 if you answered yes, often, or sometimes, and it's set equal to 0 if you say rarely or never. And there's really no statistically significant differences in appetizer, entree, dessert, drink, or total calories. Same thing if we ask people, when we ask people, do you use the calorie information? How frequently? Again, no significant difference. So interestingly, you'd think the people who say they use the calorie information would respond more, but we don't find evidence that they do so, at least not a significant amount. Do you tend to order fewer calories based on calorie information? Because one debate is that by something that people are worried about is if you put calorie information on the menu, people might focus on it and think that's what defines a good deal, right? Divide the number of calories by the dollar, and it's like bang for your buck, right?
Did you look at that dependent variable? Because I was thinking some people, you might have this very, regardless of what people say, actual
Might be affected by the
that
treatment.
people who are strapped for cash. I mean, I thought that was one of the reasons why Apple didn't find results necessarily, because some people in low-income neighborhoods look like, how do I get the maximum number of calories I need for my $2 I've got? So you could have two heterogeneous responses here and ended up canceling each other out from the poor, starving students, grad students, and then.
Yeah, so that's why we want to interact that with the treatment, and if we see a significant difference, that tells us that this group is responding differently.
I'm just saying that what people say on a survey may not be.
Yep.
If you just use a dependent variable of calories divided by price, so in terms of like bang for the buck.
Oh, I see what you're saying. Oh, that's it. Yeah, okay.
And then interacting with more objective, let's say, demographic factors.
Okay, yeah, that's neat. Yeah, that's a great suggestion. Thanks. And so the one significant interaction that we do see here is that the entree calories are significantly lower by a lot, 221 fewer, if they say they order fewer calories based on the calorie information. But overall, it's not significantly lower because those same people are ordering slightly more desserts and slightly larger appetizers. So maybe they skip the appetizer, get an appetizer and dessert instead. These are other mediating variables. Are you in favor of calorie labeling? But we don't see statistically significant differences. Did you see the calorie labels? The one big difference is these people are ordering fewer overall. Did you diet in the past year? No significant differences. So in general, we're not finding a lot in terms of like heterogeneity in the response. Even obese individuals, we're not seeing significant differences in how they respond, and so on. So just to summarize, overall we find that the menu labels, that getting the menu labels in a randomized experiment lowers the number of total calories that people order in their dinners in a full-service restaurant by 63.2, which is 3.6%. And that's mostly explained by the calories from appetizers, which fall by 44.3 or 9%. When you think of different courses, it lowers this calorie information lowers your probability of ordering an appetizer by 5.3 percentage points or 6.5%, and your probability of ordering an entree by 3.3 percentage points or 3.6%. There is this really interesting phenomenon we observe where it increases the probability that people order a drink by 16%, and it's a 17% increase in the probability that people order an alcoholic drink, and it's mostly beer, although the wine point estimate is similar but not statistically significant. And there's very limited effects on nutrition. We find lower carbohydrates, lower fiber, but nothing in terms of vitamins, cholesterol, fat, and so on. So one interesting back of the envelope calculation we can do is to say, well, okay, so we know these number of the lower number of calories that people order as a result of seeing the information. What impact do we think that's going to have on people's weight? So the first thing we need to do is convert the change in calories ordered to the change in calories consumed, which is Noreen's point from earlier. And these two studies indicate that approximately 89% of food is consumed rather than left on the plates. So we adjust our calorie change down to 56.3 fewer calories consumed. Then we need to convert that to a daily change. So that's just when you happen to be at a full-service restaurant. We know from USDA data that between a fifth and a fourth of Americans eat at a full-service restaurant on any given day. So multiplying by that, we get a daily reduction in calories of about 12.7. And then you need to convert that to a change in weight. And so these complex models that are developed by the National Institutes of Health estimate that a permanent reduction of 10 calories a day leads to an eventual weight loss of a pound, half after a year and 95% of that after 3 years. So it's a very gradual process. And so what that implies is that, our estimates imply that the effect of calorie labels in full-service restaurants would be to lower people's weight by about a pound after 3 years. So is that something that's going to dramatically improve Americans' health? Probably not in isolation, right? So the NIH generally describes the kind of weight loss for an obese individual that would result in health improvements of being 5% of the starting weight. So much larger than this 1 pound weight loss. But keep in mind, we're only measuring the effect from full-service sit-down restaurants. There may be further benefits from other venues, but they haven't been found for fast food yet, although they have been found for coffee shops. Comparing to the previous literature, as I just mentioned, the studies of fast food consumption or ordering, they don't find any impact. So why do we find an impact and they don't? It could be due to the difference in methods. They did street intercepts before and after. We're doing a randomized experiment. Another issue is we're mostly finding the decrease arising from appetizers, and fast food restaurants, you might think they don't really have appetizers. It could be the difference in patrons in our samples. There's also the interesting result that the labels result in a decrease in fiber, the amount of fiber that people order, and it's a decrease of 6.4%. And the reason that matters is that the USDA describes fiber as an underconsumed nutrient of public health concern. So fiber does at least two good things. So fiber, first of all, goes through your digestive tract and lowers your risks of colon cancer and so on, like digestive health. But it also improves your heart health because fiber seems to absorb low-density lipoproteins, bad cholesterol, and take them out of your body. So further lowering fiber, which is already relatively low in the American diet, is not a plus. So it's also a reminder that when we think about what information people might want or need, it's not just calories. Right? There's other information, other characteristics of food people might want or need. So now we're getting back to things that Dalton figured out in the first 15 minutes, which is that the labels seem to affect the very first decisions that people make, the appetizer and the drink, but not the later decisions of entree and dessert. And so it could be related to this concept of decision fatigue. So there's really neat studies that look at doctors prescribing unnecessary antibiotics and how they're more likely to do that the later in their shift they are. So they sort of lose the willpower to resist what the customer wants, or the client, what the patient wants. And then a really neat study with kind of horrifying results based on Israeli parole board judges and how later in the day the judges basically deny everybody. Whereas if you catch them right after lunch, you have a good shot of getting parole. So it really does seem like people lose the ability to make disciplined, informed decisions over time, and that may be what we're seeing here. Or it could be a novelty effect, calorie information, and so there's a salience, there's a novelty that later on isn't still there. And then this issue of why are people more likely to order alcohol, again, this gets back to the point Dalton brought up, which is that people may have limited or depleted willpower, and if I'm going to have to process all this information about calories to make a meal decision, I'm going to need a drink first. We didn't find any impact that the exemption of specials from the calorie label requirement led people to switch to that. We didn't see any evidence of harm to restaurants, no sort of meaningful or significant impact on revenues or our rough measure of profit. And in fact, restaurants will save on labor time. It just so happens, at least given this menu, you could imagine it with a different menu, different set of choices, that wouldn't necessarily be true. And then also, exposure to the labels increases people's support for having the calorie information in menus by 13.7%. So when people get used to the policy, it seems like they're more supportive of it. So obviously, it wouldn't be complete without talking about limitations. This is an experiment in a single restaurant on a university campus, and 62% of the patrons are students. So we are now conducting the same experiment in a different restaurant. It's also on the Cornell campus, but it's in the hotel. And so it's almost exclusively adult visitors, not students. So that'll increase our sample size, but also give us a very different sort of clientele and a completely different menu that we can judge effects with. As we talked about with the issue of dropping people who are on their secondary or tertiary visits to the restaurant, all we're measuring here is what's the impact the very first time you're exposed to this information. You could imagine seeing it again and again might lead to a bigger effect, or if it's all about salience and novelty, a lower effect. And then, of course, we have data on what people order, not what people consume. And so I think, in general, like an interesting direction for future research is we're seeing that people who saw the calorie information experienced a bigger treatment effect. And so one thing that we can do in the future is tweak the experiment so everybody's getting calorie information, but the way that it's conveyed differs. So basically, in other words, figure out ways to make this information more salient and more likely to be used. So if you have any questions, please feel free to email me. I'm happy to send you the paper when this is the first seminar presentation I've given on this topic. So our project doesn't have a paper yet, but I'm happy to send it to you if you're interested. And thanks very much for having me. I really appreciate it.